Marcus Vitale had built an empire on calculated risks and ironclad contracts. For 20 years, he'd ruled Chicago's underworld with precision, until a homeless girl with dirt-streaked cheeks burst into his office and screamed 3 words that would unravel everything. "Don't sign that." The document in his hand promised legitimacy, a clean exit from the life. But when she pointed at the signature line with trembling fingers, he saw what his lawyers had missed, a clause that would destroy not just him, but everyone he'd ever protected. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Vitale's penthouse office on North Michigan Avenue, each drop a percussion note in the symphony of Chicago's November storm. Inside, the air smelled of aged leather and expensive bourbon, the scent of power carefully cultivated over 2 decades. Marcus stood with his back to the room, watching the city lights blur through the downpour, his reflection ghosting in the glass. A man of 43 with silver threading through dark hair, shoulders still broad beneath a charcoal suit tailored on Savile Row, hands that had signed both business contracts and death warrants clasped behind his back. "The Castellano deal is ready for your signature, boss." Vincent Romano, his consigliere for 15 years, placed a leather portfolio on the mahogany desk. The document inside represented everything Marcus had worked toward, a legitimate real estate acquisition that would launder the family's operations into respectability. Hotels, restaurants, property management, clean money, a future where his name meant something other than fear. Marcus turned from the window, his movements deliberate, controlled. He'd learned early that a man in his position never rushed. Every gesture communicated authority. He crossed to the desk, the Persian rug muffling his footsteps, and lifted the fountain pen his father had given him the day he'd taken over the family. The weight of it felt like destiny. 20 years, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the faint rasp of a man who'd spent his youth shouting orders in Southside warehouses. 20 years of building this, Vinny, and now we walk away clean. Vincent nodded, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or the recognition that men like them never truly walked away. The life had teeth. It held on. Before Marcus could touch pen to paper, the office doors burst open with a crack that made Vincent's hand fly to the weapon beneath his jacket. 2 of Marcus's soldiers stumbled backward, trying to restrain a figure that fought with the desperate strength of the cornered. "Boss, we caught her in the stairwell. She wouldn't stop trying to get up here." The girl couldn't have been more than 19, rail-thin beneath layers of mismatched clothing, her dark hair matted with rain and grime. Her face was all sharp angles and hollow cheeks, the face of someone who'd learned hunger as a constant companion. But her eyes, brown and bright with something between terror and determination, locked onto Marcus with an intensity that stopped him cold. "Don't sign that!" she screamed, her voice cracking. She wrenched free from the guards and lunged toward the desk, her hand outstretched. "Please, don't sign it!" Vincent moved to intercept her, but Marcus raised one hand, a gesture that froze everyone in place. The girl stopped 3 feet from the desk, breathing hard, her whole body trembling. Up close, he could see the dirt under her fingernails, the bruise yellowing on her left cheekbone, the way her coat, 2 sizes too large, hung on her frame like a shroud. "How did you get in here?" Marcus asked, his voice soft, dangerous. "I followed the lawyers." She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the document on his desk. "I clean offices in the building across the street. I saw them preparing papers, heard them talking about you, about the Castellano deal." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "About what's really in that contract." Vincent's hand tightened on his weapon. "Boss, she's a plant. Has to be. Let me handle this." But Marcus studied the girl's face, reading the micro-expressions he'd learned to decode over decades of negotiations and interrogations. Fear? Yes. Desperation? Absolutely. But no deception. Whatever she believed it completely. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah. Sarah Chen." She wiped rain from her face with a shaking hand. "I know you don't know me. I know I'm nobody. But I've been living on the streets for 2 years, and I've learned to listen. To survive, you have to know what's coming." She pointed at the contract. "That document, it's not what they told you it is." Marcus glanced at Vincent, whose expression had shifted from anger to calculation. The consigliere moved closer to the desk, his eyes scanning the contract's visible pages. "Explain," Marcus said to Sarah, his tone flat, giving nothing away. She took a shuddering breath. Page 17. Subsection D. There's a clause about asset forfeiture in the event of criminal investigation, but the way it's worded, it doesn't just cover you. It covers anyone you've ever done business with, anyone you've ever protected. Her voice gained strength as she spoke, the words tumbling out faster. If you sign that, and if anyone decides to investigate the Castellano family, everyone connected to you goes down. Your people, your legitimate partners, your family, everyone. Vincent snatched up the contract, flipping pages with increasing urgency. Marcus watched his consigliere's face drain of color. Jesus Christ, Vincent breathed. She's right. It's buried in the legal language, but, boss, this is a trap. Sign this, and we're not getting out clean. We're handing them a loaded gun pointed at everyone we've ever protected. The room fell silent except for the rain's relentless percussion against the windows. Marcus felt the moment crystallize around him, the way critical junctures always did. Time slowing, options narrowing, the future pivoting on a single choice. He looked at Sarah Chen, this impossible girl who'd fought her way past his security to save him from his own ambition. Why? He asked her. Why would you risk this for me? Sarah's eyes filled with tears that she angrily blinked away. Because 3 months ago, one of your soup kitchens on West Madison gave me food when I was starving. Because your people don't ask questions, don't judge, they just help. She straightened her shoulders, a ghost of dignity emerging through the grime and exhaustion. I know what you are. Everyone knows. But I also know that you take care of people, and someone needs to take care of you. Marcus picked up the contract, feeling the weight of the paper, the invisible chains woven into its clauses. For 20 years, he'd built an empire on knowing when to fight and when to negotiate, when to trust, and when to eliminate threats. He'd survived by being smarter, more ruthless, more careful than everyone else, and he'd almost signed away everything that mattered. He held Sarah's gaze as he slowly, deliberately, tore the contract in half, then in half again, and again, until the pieces fluttered to the desk like snow, like surrender, like the first breath of a man who'd just stepped back from a cliff edge he hadn't seen. Vincent, Marcus said quietly, find out who drafted this, find out who knew what was in it, and find out who they're working for. On it, boss. Vincent pulled out his phone, already moving toward the door, his voice dropping into the clipped tones of a man issuing orders. Marcus turned back to Sarah, who stood frozen, as if she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a card, plain white, with only a phone number embossed in black. You saved my life tonight, he said, offering her the card. That means something. It means you're under my protection now, whether you want it or not. He paused, studying her face. When did you last eat? Sarah's composure cracked. A sob escaped her throat, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold it back. Yesterday morning, maybe. Time gets confused when you're... Vincent, Marcus called. His consigliere appeared in the doorway. Take Miss Chen to the kitchen. Make sure she gets a proper meal. Then set her up in one of the guest apartments downstairs. Clean clothes, medical attention if she needs it. He looked back at Sarah. Tomorrow we talk about what happens next. But tonight, you're safe. You have my word. Sarah clutched the card like a lifeline, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. As Vincent led her from the office, Marcus returned to the window, watching the rain wash the city clean. Behind him, the torn contract lay scattered across his desk like the fragments of a future that would never be. He'd been so close to walking into a trap that would have destroyed not just him, but everyone who'd ever trusted him. A homeless girl had saved him, a nobody with nothing, who'd risked everything to warn a man she'd never met. The irony wasn't lost on him. In a life built on power and control, on calculated moves and ruthless efficiency, salvation had come from the most unexpected source. Someone with no agenda, no angle, no reason to care, except basic human decency. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Marcus, it's been a long time. I need information, detective, Marcus said, his voice hard. Someone just tried to trap me, and I need to know who's behind it. I'm sending you something that might interest your investigation into the Castellano family. What's this going to cost me? Consider it a gift, but I'll remember the favor. He ended the call and stood in the silence, feeling the weight of the empire he'd built pressing down on his shoulders. For 20 years, He'd controlled everything, anticipated every move, protected his people through force and fear and careful planning. Tonight, he'd learned that sometimes protection came from the places you least expected, from the people you'd never see coming, and that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. Morning broke over Chicago, with the pale, watery light of late autumn, the kind of dawn that promised cold and little else. Marcus had been awake for hours, sitting in his private study with a tumbler of whiskey he hadn't touched, watching the sun struggle through the cloud cover. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford, not when someone had tried to destroy him with a pen stroke, not when the careful architecture of his exit strategy had crumbled in his hands. Vincent arrived at 7, looking as exhausted as Marcus felt. The consigliere dropped a thick folder on the desk, his expression grim. The contract was drafted by Castellano's lawyers, but the poison pill clause? That came from someone else, someone with access to federal prosecution strategies. Vincent poured himself coffee from the carafe Marcus kept on the side table. I've got 3 names. All of them have connections to the U.S. Attorney's Office. All of them have been building cases against organized crime families for the past 5 years. Marcus opened the folder, scanning the photographs and dossiers inside. Assistant prosecutors, investigators, legal consultants, the machinery of the justice system weaponized against him. They wanted me to sign my own arrest warrant. Worse than that, they wanted you to sign everyone's arrest warrant. Your soldiers, your legitimate business partners, the charities you fund, anyone with a paper trail connecting them to you. Vincent's jaw tightened. It's a RICO case waiting to happen. Sign that contract, and they'd have legal grounds to seize everything and everyone. How did they know I'd go for it? Because you've been talking about going legitimate for 2 years. Everyone knows it. Your ambition made you predictable. Vincent sat down heavily. They played you, boss. They played all of us. The words stung because they were true. Marcus had wanted out so badly that he'd stopped being careful. He'd let hope cloud his judgment, and in their world, hope was a weakness that got you killed. What about the girl? Marcus asked. Sarah Chen. What did you find out about her? Vincent pulled out another file, thinner than the first. 19 years old, originally from San Francisco. Parents died in a car accident when she was 16. Drunk driver, no other family. She aged out of foster care, tried to make it on her own, ended up on the streets about 2 years ago like she said. No criminal record, no gang affiliations, no red flags. She's exactly what she appears to be. A kid who got dealt a bad hand and is trying to survive. Marcus studied Sarah's photograph, a school picture from 3 years ago, before the streets had carved away her softness. She'd been pretty then, with clear skin and hope in her eyes. Now she was all edges and wariness, a girl who'd learned that the world didn't care whether you lived or died. Where is she now? Guest apartment, 3rd floor. She ate everything we put in front of her, took a shower that lasted 40 minutes, and fell asleep in the clothes we gave her. Maria checked on her an hour ago, still out cold. Marcus nodded slowly, his mind working through the implications. Sarah Chen had saved him, which meant he owed her a debt. In his world, debts were currency, and this one was substantial. But more than that, she represented something he'd almost forgotten existed: genuine altruism. She'd had nothing to gain and everything to lose by warning him, and she'd done it anyway. That kind of integrity was rare. In his experience, it was also dangerous, to her and to anyone who tried to protect her. I want her watched, Marcus said, discreetly. Make sure no one connected to the Castellano situation knows she exists. If they find out she's the reason I didn't sign, they'll come for her. Already done. I've got 2 of our best on rotation outside her apartment. Vincent hesitated. Boss, what are you planning to do with her? It was a fair question. Marcus had built his empire on clear hierarchies and defined roles. Everyone had a place, a function, a reason for being in his orbit. Sarah Chen fit none of those categories. She was a civilian, an outsider, someone who'd stumbled into his world by accident and somehow changed everything. I don't know yet, Marcus admitted, but she's under my protection now. That's not negotiable. Vincent nodded, accepting the decision without argument. That was why he'd survived 15 years as consigliere. He knew when to push and when to follow. The intercom on Marcus's desk buzzed. Mr. Vitale, Detective Morrison is here to see you. Marcus and Vincent exchanged glances. The detective was early, which meant the information Marcus had provided had yielded results. Send him up. Detective James Morrison was a 20-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department, a man who'd learned to navigate the gray spaces between law and order. He'd never been on Marcus's payroll. That would have been too obvious, too compromising. But they'd developed an understanding over the years. Information traded for information. Mutual interests occasionally aligned. A careful dance that benefited both sides without crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Morrison entered the office with the weary confidence of a man who'd seen too much and believed too little. He was in his 50s, with iron gray hair and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile. He nodded at Vincent, then focused on Marcus. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," Morrison said without preamble. "The contract you sent me? It's part of a larger operation. The U.S. Attorney's Office has been building a case against the Castellano family for 3 years. They wanted you as a cooperating witness. But when you wouldn't flip, they decided to make you collateral damage." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression neutral. "They tried to trap me into implicating everyone I've ever worked with." "Exactly. Sign that contract, and you'd have created a legal framework that would let them seize assets, freeze accounts, and arrest anyone with a connection to your operations." Morrison pulled out a small notebook. "The lead prosecutor is Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Brennan. She's ambitious, smart, and she doesn't care who gets hurt as long as she gets her conviction. She's been targeting organized crime families as a stepping stone to a judgeship. So this was never about justice," Vincent said. "It was about her career. Welcome to the system." Morrison's tone was bitter. "Brennan's been working with someone inside the Castellano organization. Someone who wants to take over and is willing to burn everything down to do it." Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. Dominic Castellano, the old man's nephew. He's been pushing for more aggressive expansion, more risk. His uncle has been holding him back. That's my read too. Dominic feeds Brennan information, she builds her case, and when the dust settles, Dominic takes over what's left of the family. Morrison closed his notebook. "You were supposed to be the bridge. Sign that contract, legitimize the Castellano operations, and then Brennan swoops in and takes everyone down. Dominic emerges clean because he's been cooperating with the feds. Except I didn't sign." Marcus's voice was cold. "Which means their timeline just collapsed. Which means they're going to come at you harder. Brennan doesn't like losing, and Dominic can't afford to have you as an enemy." Morrison met Marcus's eyes. "You need to be careful. These people play for keeps." "So do I, Detective." Morrison nodded slowly. "I figured you'd say that, which is why I'm here to give you a heads up. Brennan's planning to move on the Castellano family within the next 2 weeks. She's got enough for indictments, and she's going to roll up everyone she can reach. If you're anywhere near that operation when it goes down, you're going to get caught in the net. Then I'll make sure I'm not near it." Marcus stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Thank you for the information, Detective. I won't forget this. Just stay out of trouble, Vitale. I'd hate to have to arrest you." Morrison's tone suggested he meant it, at least partially. After the detective left, Vincent turned to Marcus. "We need to move fast. Cut ties with the Castellano family, shore up our legitimate operations, make sure nothing connects us to whatever's about to go down." "Agreed. But we also need to send a message." Marcus's expression hardened. "Dominic Castellano tried to use me as a weapon against his own family. That can't stand. What did you have in mind?" "Information. We feed Brennan everything we know about Dominic's side operations, the ones his uncle doesn't know about. The drug trafficking, the human smuggling, the money laundering that doesn't go through official family channels. Let her build her case against him too." Vincent smiled grimly. "Poetic justice. He tried to burn you, so you burn him back." "Exactly. And we make sure the old man knows where the information came from. Let him deal with his nephew's betrayal." It was ruthless, efficient, and exactly the kind of move that had kept Marcus alive and in power for 2 decades. But as he gave the orders, as he watched Vincent leave to set the plan in motion, Marcus felt something unfamiliar gnawing at him. Doubt. He'd built his empire on moves like this: calculated betrayals, strategic eliminations, the careful manipulation of enemies and allies alike. It had always felt necessary, justified, the cost of survival in a world that showed no mercy. But Sarah Chen had risked everything for him without calculation, without strategy, without expecting anything in return. She'd acted out of simple human decency, and it had saved his life. What did it say about him that his first instinct was still to destroy his enemies rather than find another way? Marcus pushed the thought aside. Doubt was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not now. Not with enemies circling and his empire under threat. He'd do what he'd always done: protect his people, eliminate threats, and survive. But as he returned to the window, watching the city wake up below him, he couldn't shake the image of Sarah Chen's face, the determination in her eyes, the courage it had taken to burst into his office and scream a warning. She'd saved him, and in doing so, she'd reminded him that there were still people in the world who acted without angles, without agendas, without the corruption that had defined his life for so long. He owed her more than protection. He owed her the chance to stay that way, uncorrupted, uncompromised, free from the darkness that had consumed him, even if it meant keeping her at arm's length from the war that was about to begin. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, her body sinking into a mattress so soft it felt like floating. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The streets had trained her to wake with adrenaline, ready to run or fight. But then memory returned. The office, the contract, Marcus Vitale's cold eyes warming with something that might have been respect. She sat up slowly, taking in the guest apartment. It was larger than any place she'd lived in since her parents died. A studio with clean white walls, modern furniture, and a kitchenette stocked with food. Real food, not the scraps she'd scavenged from dumpsters or the thin soup from charity kitchens. On the chair beside the bed, someone had left fresh clothes in her size: jeans, a sweater, undergarments still in their packaging, and a winter coat that looked expensive. Sarah touched the coat with trembling fingers, half convinced it would disappear. She'd spent 2 years learning that good things didn't last, that every moment of warmth or safety was temporary, borrowed time before the cold returned. A knock on the door made her flinch. "Miss Chen, it's Maria. I've brought breakfast." Sarah opened the door to find a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Maria carried a tray laden with scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and coffee that smelled like heaven. "Mr. Vitale asked me to check on you," Maria said, setting the tray on the small table. "He'd like to speak with you this afternoon if you're feeling up to it." "I'm fine. Thank you for everything." Sarah's voice cracked. She'd almost forgotten what kindness felt like. Maria smiled gently. "Eat. You need your strength. And take your time. No one's rushing you." After Maria left, Sarah ate slowly, savoring every bite, trying not to think about what came next. Marcus Vitale was a dangerous man. Everyone knew that. He controlled territory, commanded loyalty through fear and respect, and had survived in a world where most men died young or ended up in prison. She'd saved his life, but that didn't make her safe. It made her valuable, which in some ways was worse, but she'd had no choice. When she'd seen those lawyers celebrating in the office across the street, when she'd heard them laughing about the trap they'd set for Vitale, something in her had rebelled. She'd spent 2 years watching people ignore suffering, step over homeless bodies, treat the invisible population of the streets like they didn't exist. And then she'd remembered the soup kitchen on West Madison, the volunteers who'd looked her in the eye and treated her like a human being. Marcus Vitale might be a criminal, but his people had fed her when she was starving. That had to mean something. At 2 o'clock, Vincent Romano appeared at her door. "Mr. Vitale will see you now." Sarah followed him through corridors that spoke of wealth and power. Marble floors, original artwork, security cameras discreetly positioned at every corner. They took an elevator to the top floor, where Vincent led her to the same office she'd burst into the night before. In daylight, it was even more impressive. The view of Chicago stretching to the horizon, the mahogany furniture gleaming, the air thick with the scent of leather and old money. Marcus stood by the window, his back to her, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. When he turned, his expression was unreadable. "Miss Chen, I trust you slept well?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." Sarah forced herself to meet his eyes, to not show the fear that coiled in her stomach. "Sit." He gestured to a leather chair facing his desk. "We need to talk about what happens next." Sarah sat, her hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. Marcus settled into his chair with the controlled grace of a predator, his gaze never leaving her face. "You saved my life last night," he said. "That creates a debt. In my world, debts are sacred. They must be honored." He paused, studying her. "The question is, what do you want?" Sarah blinked, caught off guard. She'd expected orders, instructions, maybe a payoff and a warning to disappear. She hadn't expected to be asked what she wanted. "I don't understand. You risked everything to warn me. You could have been killed." My men could have shot you before you got 3 words out, but you came anyway. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Why? I told you. Your soup kitchen helped me when… No. His voice was sharp, cutting through her rehearsed answer. That's part of it, but not all of it. I've been reading people for 20 years, Miss Chen. You're not just grateful. You're angry. At someone or something. And that anger drove you to do something incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. His eyes narrowed. Which was it? Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. He was right. She was angry. Angry at the system that had let her parents' killer walk away with a slap on the wrist because he was rich and connected. Angry at the foster care system that had treated her like a problem to be managed. Angry at a world that had taught her that justice was a luxury only the powerful could afford. Both, she whispered. It was both. Marcus nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. You don't trust the system. You don't believe in official channels or legal remedies. You've learned that the only justice in this world is the kind you make yourself. Yes, the word came out fierce, defiant. Good. Then we understand each other. Marcus opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. I'm going to offer you something, Miss Chen, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. I'm offering you a job. Sarah stared at him. A job? You're observant. You listen. You notice things other people miss. Those are valuable skills. He slid the folder across the desk. I need someone I can trust. Someone who isn't part of my organization, who doesn't have the baggage and loyalties that come with this life. Someone who can move through the world invisible, the way you've been doing for 2 years. Sarah opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a contract. A real employment contract with salary, benefits, and job description. Administrative assistant and community liaison, she read aloud. A cover, Marcus said bluntly. The real job is to be my eyes and ears in places my people can't go. The streets, the shelters, the places where information flows among people the powerful ignore. You'll report directly to me. No one else needs to know what you're really doing. You want me to be a spy. I want you to survive. And I want to make sure that what happened last night, someone trying to trap me, never happens again. His expression softened fractionally. You'll be paid well. You'll have a safe place to live, food, healthcare, everything you need, and you'll be under my protection, which means no one will touch you. Sarah looked at the contract, at the salary that would change her life, at the promise of safety she'd been chasing for 2 years. It was everything she needed, everything she'd dreamed of during long, cold nights on the streets, but it came with a price. Working for Marcus Vitale meant entering his world, accepting his rules, becoming part of the machinery of power and violence that defined his empire. What if I say no? She asked quietly. Marcus didn't hesitate. Then I'll set you up with enough money to start over somewhere else. New city, new identity if you want it. Enough to get on your feet. No strings attached. The debt will be paid. You'd just let me walk away. I don't keep people against their will, Miss Chen. Loyalty that's forced isn't loyalty. It's slavery. And I have no use for slaves. He stood, moving to the window. But I'll tell you this. The people who tried to trap me know someone warned me. They don't know who yet, but they will eventually. And when they do, they'll come for you. My protection is the only thing standing between you and some very dangerous people. Sarah felt the trap closing around her, but it wasn't Marcus's doing. It was the consequence of her own choice. By warning him, she'd made herself a target. By stepping into his world, she'd left her old life behind whether she wanted to or not. If I take this job, she said slowly, I need one condition. Marcus turned, his eyebrows rising slightly. You're negotiating? You said debts are sacred. You owe me. So yes, I'm negotiating. Sarah stood, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I want to help people. Really help them. Not just gather information. The soup kitchens, the shelters, the programs that help people like me. I want to be part of that. I want to make a difference. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then, slowly, he smiled. A real smile that transformed his face from intimidating to almost human. Deal. You'll work with our charitable operations, expand them if you can. But you'll also do the other work. The listening, the watching, the reporting. Both jobs, full commitment. Sarah took a deep breath and picked up the pen lying on the desk. Her hand shook as she signed her name on the contract, but she didn't hesitate. She'd spent 2 years surviving. Now she was choosing to live. Welcome to the family, Miss Chen. The words should have felt ominous. Instead, they felt like coming home. 3 weeks after Sarah signed the contract, Marcus's world began to unravel. It started with a phone call at 3 a.m, the kind of call that meant blood and consequences. Marcus answered on the second ring, already awake, already braced for bad news. "Boss, we've got a problem." Vincent's voice was tight. "Dominic Castellano just hit one of our distribution centers on the south side. 4 of our guys are dead. He's sending a message." Marcus was out of bed and dressed in under 2 minutes, his mind already calculating responses and consequences. Dominic had made his move, which meant the situation with the U.S. attorney had forced his hand. Desperate men did desperate things. "Where are you?" "The warehouse on Halstead. You need to see this." The drive through Chicago's pre-dawn streets gave Marcus time to think. The information he'd fed to Detective Morrison should have reached Catherine Brennan by now. She should be building her case against Dominic, preparing to bring down both him and his uncle. But if Dominic was attacking Marcus's operations, it meant he knew the trap was closing, and he was trying to eliminate threats before it snapped shut. The warehouse was a crime scene when Marcus arrived. Police tape, flashing lights, detectives taking statements. But Vincent had connections, and they'd kept the real story contained. Officially, it was a robbery gone wrong. Unofficially, it was a declaration of war. Marcus walked through the warehouse, past the covered bodies of his men, past the burned inventory and destroyed equipment. The message was clear. Dominic wanted him to know this was personal. "He's trying to provoke you," Vincent said quietly. "He wants you to retaliate, to give Brennan an excuse to come after you too." "I know." Marcus's voice was ice. "Which is why we're not going to give him what he wants. Boss, we're going to let the system handle Dominic. Brennan will move soon, and when she does, he'll be too busy saving himself to come after us." Marcus turned to face his consigliere. "But we are going to make sure he knows we could have destroyed him. We're going to make him live with that knowledge." It was a calculated decision, the kind of restraint that had kept Marcus in power when more hot-headed rivals had burned out or ended up dead. But it felt wrong, felt like weakness, and he could see the doubt in Vincent's eyes. "What about our guys? They died for us. Don't we owe them vengeance? We owe them survival. We owe them a family that's still standing when the dust settles." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Dominic wants us to destroy ourselves. I won't give him the satisfaction." He left Vincent to handle the cleanup and drove to the office as dawn broke over the city. The streets were waking up. Delivery trucks, early commuters, the machinery of civilization grinding back to life. Marcus had always found comfort in that rhythm, the predictability of it, but now it felt fragile, as if the whole structure could collapse at any moment. Sarah was waiting in his office when he arrived, a cup of coffee in her hands and worry in her eyes. She'd been working for him for 3 weeks, and in that time, she'd proven herself invaluable. She moved through the city's underbelly with ease, gathering information, building relationships, becoming exactly what Marcus had hoped, his eyes and ears in places he couldn't reach. But she'd also become something he hadn't expected, a conscience. "I heard about the warehouse," she said quietly. "Are you okay?" Marcus poured himself a drink despite the early hour. 4 good men are dead. "No, I'm not okay." "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. We're going to let the law handle it." Sarah's eyes widened. "You're not going to retaliate?" "Retaliation is what Dominic wants. It would give the U.S. attorney an excuse to come after me." Marcus drank, feeling the whiskey burn. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is nothing. That's not nothing. That's strategy. Sarah set down her coffee and moved closer. "But it's eating you up inside, isn't it? Having to let it go?" Marcus looked at her. This 19-year-old girl who'd somehow learned to read him better than people who'd known him for decades. "You're very perceptive, Miss Chen." "I've had to be. On the streets, reading people is survival." She hesitated, then said, "Can I tell you something? About why I really warned you that night? I thought we'd established that. Not all of it." Sarah took a breath. "My parents were killed by a drunk driver. He was the son of a state senator. He got 6 months in county jail, served 3, and walked away. No real consequences. No justice." Her voice hardened. "I learned that night that the system protects the powerful and punishes the weak. That the only way to survive is to understand how power really works." Marcus studied her face, seeing the anger and pain beneath her composed exterior. "So you warned me because you understand power." "I warned you because I saw someone trying to use the system as a weapon, and I was tired of watching the system win." She met his eyes. "You're not a good man, Mr. Vitale. But you're honest about what you are. You don't hide behind laws and legitimacy while doing terrible things. And your people, The ones running the soup kitchens and shelters. They actually help people. They don't just talk about it. It was the most honest assessment anyone had ever given him. Marcus found himself smiling despite the weight of the morning's violence. "You're wasted as an administrative assistant. Good thing that's not my real job." Sarah smiled back, but it faded quickly. "There's something else. I heard something last night at the shelter on West Madison. One of the women there, she used to work as a cleaner in the federal building. She said there's going to be a big operation soon. Multiple arrests, coordinated raids. She didn't have details, but the timing matches what you've been expecting." Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. Brennan's making her move. That's what I thought. Which means Dominic is running out of time. He'll get more desperate, more reckless. Marcus pulled out his phone. "I need to make sure our people are protected. If Brennan's raids catch us in the crossfire..." He stopped mid-sentence as his phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Detective Morrison. Vitale, we need to talk. Now, somewhere private." 20 minutes later, Marcus met Morrison in a parking garage downtown, the kind of anonymous location they'd used for years. The detective looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Brennan's moving tomorrow night," Morrison said without preamble. "She's got warrants for the entire Castellano family. The old man, Dominic, and about 30 associates. It's going to be the biggest organized crime bust in Chicago history." "Good. Let her have them." "There's a problem. Your name is on one of the warrants." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. "What?" "Dominic gave Brennan something. Documents, recordings. I don't know what. But it's enough to tie you to the Castellano operations. Enough for conspiracy charges." Morrison's expression was grim. "She's coming for you, too." "That's impossible. I never signed that contract. I cut ties with the Castellanos weeks ago." "Doesn't matter. Dominic manufactured evidence. And Brennan's ambitious enough to run with it, even if it's shaky." Morrison handed him a folder. "These are copies of what she's got. It's not much, but in the right hands, with the right jury, it could be enough." Marcus opened the folder, his blood running cold as he scanned the documents. Forged signatures, fabricated meeting records, financial transactions that had been manipulated to look like money laundering. It was a masterful frame job, the kind that could survive preliminary hearings and make it to trial. "How long do I have?" 24 hours, maybe less. Brennan's keeping the operation tight, but word will leak. It always does. Morrison met his eyes. "You need to disappear, Vitale. Tonight. Take your people and run." Marcus closed the folder, his mind racing through options. Running meant abandoning everything he'd built, his empire, his legitimate businesses, his people. It meant admitting defeat, letting Dominic and Brennan win. But staying meant prison, meant watching his organization crumble while he fought a legal battle he might not win. "There's another option," Morrison said quietly. "You could cooperate. Give Brennan what she really wants. The Castellanos. Testify against them, and she might let you walk." "No." The word was absolute. "I don't betray my people. Ever. Even if it means losing everything?" "Especially then. Because if I betray them, I've already lost everything that matters." Morrison nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. "Then you need to move fast. Get your affairs in order, protect your people, and get out before tomorrow night." After Morrison left, Marcus sat in his car, feeling the weight of 20 years pressing down on him. He'd built an empire on loyalty and strength, on being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. And now it was crumbling because he'd trusted the wrong people, because he'd wanted legitimacy badly enough to make himself vulnerable. Sarah had saved him once, but she couldn't save him from this. He drove back to the office, his mind made up. He would protect his people, secure their futures, and then he would disappear. It was the only way to keep them safe from the storm that was coming. But when he walked into his office, Sarah was there, and the look on her face told him she already knew. "Vincent told me," she said, "about the warrants. Then you know I have to leave." "No." Sarah's voice was fierce. "You have to fight. You have to prove Dominic manufactured that evidence. There's no time. Brennan moves tomorrow night. Then we make time." Sarah pulled out her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. "I know someone. A hacker. Lives in the shelters. Does work for cash. If Dominic forged those documents, there'll be a digital trail. We can find it." Marcus stared at her. "You're talking about breaking into federal systems. That's illegal? So is framing someone for crimes they didn't commit. Sarah's eyes blazed. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You protected me. Let me return the favor." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Vincent, I need you to find someone. A hacker. Miss Chen will give you the details." He looked at Sarah. "We have 24 hours to prove I'm innocent. Let's make them count." It was reckless, desperate, and exactly the kind of move that could destroy them both. But as Sarah smiled, fierce and determined and utterly fearless, Marcus realized something that should have terrified him. He trusted her, completely, with his life and his freedom and everything he'd built. And that trust, more than anything else, told him he'd already changed in ways he couldn't undo. The hacker's name was Alex Chen, no relation to Sarah, though they'd bonded over the shared surname during Sarah's time on the streets. Alex was 23, non-binary, and possessed a gift for digital infiltration that bordered on supernatural. They lived in a converted storage unit in Pilsen, surrounded by screens and servers powered by electricity siphoned from the building's main line. Marcus had dealt with hackers before, the kind who worked for money and had no loyalty beyond the next paycheck. But Alex was different. They worked for Sarah, and Sarah worked for Marcus, and that chain of trust was the only thing keeping this desperate plan from falling apart. "The documents Brennan has are good," Alex said, their fingers dancing across 3 keyboards simultaneously. "Professional forgeries, probably done by someone with access to federal databases, but good isn't perfect. Every digital document leaves a signature. Metadata, edit logs, creation timestamps. If these are fake, I can prove it." "How long?" Marcus asked, watching lines of code scroll across the screens. "Give me 12 hours, maybe less if I get lucky." Alex glanced at Sarah. "You sure about this? If I get caught, it's federal prison. If you get caught helping me, same thing." "We're sure," Sarah said firmly. She'd barely left Marcus's side since Morrison's warning, her presence a constant reminder of what he stood to lose and what he was fighting to protect. Marcus pulled Vincent aside while Alex worked. "I need you to prepare for the worst. If this doesn't work, if Brennan comes for me tomorrow night, I need to know our people are protected." "Already done, boss. I've got contingency plans in place." Money moved to secure accounts, legal representation lined up, instructions for everyone to lawyer up and say nothing. Vincent's expression was grim. "But I still think you should run. We can rebuild somewhere else. And leave everyone here to face Brennan alone? No, we stay and fight." Marcus looked back at Sarah, who was leaning over Alex's shoulder, pointing at something on the screen. "Besides, I'm tired of running from people who think they can destroy me with paperwork and lies." The next 12 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He stayed in Alex's cramped space, watching the hacker work, drinking bad coffee and trying not to think about the prison cell waiting for him if this failed. Sarah brought food, made phone calls, coordinated with Vincent to make sure their legitimate operations were protected from the coming storm. And slowly, piece by piece, Alex built their case. "Got it," Alex said at 4 a.m, their voice hoarse with exhaustion. "The documents were created 6 days ago, not 6 months ago like they're dated. The metadata's been scrubbed, but not well enough. And look at this." They pulled up a screen showing file access logs. Someone with credentials from the U.S. Attorney's Office accessed the federal database and pulled templates for financial disclosure forms. Then those templates were modified to include your information. "Can you prove it was Dominic?" Marcus asked. "Not directly. But I can prove the documents are fake, and I can show that someone in Brennan's office helped create them. That should be enough to kill the warrant." "We need to get this to Morrison," Sarah said. "He can take it to a judge. Get the warrant thrown out before the raids happen." Marcus checked his watch. 16 hours until Brennan moved. "Vincent, get Morrison on the phone. Tell him we have evidence of prosecutorial misconduct, and we need an emergency hearing." What followed was a blur of phone calls, legal maneuvering, and desperate negotiations. Morrison took the evidence to a federal judge he trusted, a woman known for her intolerance of procedural violations. The judge reviewed Alex's findings, compared them to the warrants Brennan had submitted, and made a decision that would echo through Chicago's legal system for years. At 6 o'clock that evening, 3 hours before Brennan's planned raids, the judge issued an order suspending all warrants related to Marcus Vitale, pending an investigation into evidence tampering. She also ordered Brennan to appear in chambers to explain how forged documents had made it into a federal case. Marcus got the news from Morrison while standing in his office, watching the sun set over Chicago. Sarah was beside him, her hand somehow finding his, her grip tight with relief and exhaustion. "You're clear," Morrison said. "The warrant's dead, and Brennan's career is probably dead too. The judge is furious. What about the Castellanos? The raids are still happening. The evidence against them is solid, but you're not part of it anymore." Morrison paused. "You got lucky, Vitale. Don't waste it." "I won't. Thank you, Detective." After he hung up, Marcus stood in silence, feeling the weight of the past 24 hours settle into his bones. He'd come within hours of losing everything: his freedom, his empire, his future, and he'd been saved by a homeless girl and a hacker living in a storage unit, two people who existed on the margins of society and had somehow become his salvation. "It's over," Sarah said quietly. "You're safe. For now." Marcus turned to face her, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes, the toll the past day had taken. "But Dominic's still out there, and he knows I'm the reason his frame job failed. Let him come. We'll be ready." Marcus smiled despite himself. "You've gotten very comfortable with this life, Miss Chen. I've gotten comfortable with fighting back. There's a difference." Sarah squeezed his hand once, then let go. "What happens now?" "Now we watch the Castellanos fall, and we make sure everyone knows we had nothing to do with it." Marcus moved to his desk, already planning the next moves. "Dominic will be arrested tonight. His uncle will probably die in prison, and we'll be here, clean and legitimate. Exactly what we've been trying to become. Except you're not legitimate. Not really." "No, but I'm closer than I was." Marcus looked at her. "You helped make that possible. You and Alex. I won't forget that." "Good, because I'm going to hold you to your promise. The soup kitchens, the shelters, the programs that help people. I want to expand them, really make a difference. Consider it done." That night, as promised, federal agents swept through Chicago in coordinated raids that dismantled the Castellano crime family in a single operation. 43 people were arrested, including Dominic Castellano and his uncle. The news called it the biggest organized crime bust in decades. Marcus watched the coverage from his office, Vincent beside him, both men silent as they witnessed the end of an era. The Castellanos had been a fixture of Chicago's underworld for 3 generations. Now they were gone, destroyed by their own ambition and betrayal. "We could have been part of that," Vincent said quietly. "If Sarah hadn't warned you about the contract, if Alex hadn't proven the documents were fake, we'd be in handcuffs right now." "I know." Marcus poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to his consigliere. "To second chances. To second chances," Vincent echoed, and they drank. Later, after Vincent left, Marcus found Sarah on the building's rooftop, standing at the edge and looking out over the city. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and she'd wrapped herself in the expensive coat he'd given her weeks ago. She looked different from the desperate girl who'd burst into his office. Stronger, more confident, like someone who'd found her place in the world. "You should be celebrating," Marcus said, joining her at the railing. "You saved me. Again." "I'm not much for celebrating." Sarah's voice was soft. "I keep thinking about all the people who got arrested tonight. The families that just lost fathers and sons and brothers. The lives that just got destroyed. They made their choices. They knew the risks, did they? Or were they just trying to survive like everyone else?" She turned to face him. "I'm not saying they're innocent, but I'm not sure anyone in this world is truly guilty either. We're all just doing what we think we have to do." Marcus had no answer for that. She was right, in a way that made him uncomfortable. He'd spent 20 years justifying his choices, telling himself that he was protecting his people, that he was better than the alternatives. But standing here, looking at the city he'd fought so hard to control, he wondered if he'd just been lying to himself. "What do you want, Sarah?" he asked. "Really want? Not the job, not the safety. What do you want from this life?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want to matter. I want to help people who can't help themselves. I want to make sure that what happened to me, losing everything, ending up on the streets, doesn't happen to other people." She met his eyes. "And I want to believe that people can change, that someone like you can become something better than what you were. That's a lot of faith to put in a man like me. Maybe, but you tore up that contract. You protected me. You're trying to go legitimate. That has to count for something." Marcus looked at her, this impossible girl who'd saved his life twice and somehow made him want to be worthy of that salvation, and felt something shift inside him. For 20 years, he'd been Marcus Vitale, the crime boss, the man who controlled territory and commanded fear. But maybe, just maybe, He could become something else, someone better. It counts, he said quietly, and I'll try to make sure it keeps counting. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes. That's all anyone can do. Try. They stood together on the rooftop as the city lights blazed below them. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and somehow created light. The future was uncertain, dangerous, full of threats they couldn't yet see. But for the first time in 20 years, Marcus Vitale felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. 6 months after the Castellano family's fall, Marcus stood in the grand opening of the Vitale Community Center on West Madison Street, the same street where Sarah had once stood in line for soup, hungry and desperate and invisible. The building had been a warehouse, one of his old distribution centers. Now it was a 3-story facility with a commercial kitchen, sleeping quarters for 50 people, job training classrooms, and medical clinic. The transformation had cost him more than money. It had required him to confront what his empire had been built on and decide what it would become. Sarah stood beside him, wearing a professional suit and the confident smile of someone who'd found her purpose. She'd been instrumental in designing the center, in reaching out to the community, in building trust with people who had every reason to distrust anyone associated with Marcus Vitale's name. You did this, Marcus said quietly, as they watched families tour the facility. This was your vision. You paid for it. You made it possible. Sarah's smile softened. We did this. Together. Vincent approached, looking uncomfortable in the civilian setting, but managing a genuine smile. The mayor's here. Wants to shake your hand, get some photos. Good publicity. Marcus nodded, but before he could move, a woman approached, middle-aged, with graying hair, and eyes that held both wariness and hope. Mr. Vitale? I'm Jennifer Martinez. My son was arrested in the Castellano raids. He worked for them, did some driving, some deliveries. He's looking at 5 years. She swallowed hard. I heard you help people. I was wondering if... I'll make some calls, Marcus said gently. If your son cooperates with the prosecutors, if he testifies honestly, I'll make sure he has the best legal representation. I can't promise he'll walk away free, but I can promise he'll be treated fairly. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Thank you so much. After she left, Sarah touched his arm. You're helping the families of people who worked for your enemies. I'm helping people who got caught in the crossfire. There's a difference. Marcus watched Jennifer disappear into the crowd. Besides, her son was just trying to survive. I understand that better than most. The mayor's photo opportunity was brief and professional. Marcus had learned to navigate these events, the handshakes, the carefully worded statements, the performance of legitimacy. He'd closed down his illegal operations over the past 6 months, divesting from anything that couldn't survive legal scrutiny. Some of his people had been unhappy with the changes, but Vincent had managed the transition with his usual efficiency. They were smaller now, less powerful in the traditional sense, but they were also cleaner, safer, positioned to survive in a world where the old rules were changing. After the ceremony, Marcus found Alex in the center's computer lab, setting up systems and training volunteers. The hacker had come a long way from their storage unit in Pilsen. They now ran IT for all of Marcus's legitimate operations, and had become something like a friend. This is good work you're doing, Alex said, not looking up from their screen. Real help for real people. Sarah must be proud. She is. We both are. Marcus paused. I never properly thanked you for what you did. You risked everything to help me. I did it for Sarah, but you're welcome. Alex finally looked at him. You're different than I expected. Most people with your reputation, they don't change. They don't try to be better, but you're actually doing it. I'm trying. That's all I can promise. That's more than most people do. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the center had quieted, Marcus and Sarah walked through the empty halls. The building still smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings, and Marcus found himself thinking about the warehouse it had been, the illegal goods stored here, the violence that had sometimes erupted in these spaces. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked, as if reading his thoughts. Giving up the power, the control, becoming something smaller. Every day, Marcus admitted. But I regret what I was more. The things I did, the people I hurt, the man I became. He stopped walking, turning to face her. You asked me once what I wanted. I didn't have an answer then, but I do now. What do you want? I want to matter in a way that doesn't require fear. I want to build something that lasts beyond me. He hesitated, then said, I want to be someone you can be proud to work for. Someone who deserves the faith you've shown in me." Sarah's eyes glistened. "You already are. You just needed to see it." They continued walking, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls, and Marcus felt the weight of his past beginning to lift. He would never be free of it entirely. The violence, the choices, the lives he'd affected. But he could choose what came next. He could build something better. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a call from Detective Morrison. They met at their usual spot, the anonymous parking garage where they'd shared information for years. "Thought you'd want to know," Morrison said. Catherine Brennan was disbarred. The investigation found she'd knowingly used fabricated evidence in multiple cases. "Not just yours. She's facing criminal charges." "Good. She tried to destroy innocent people for her career." "Yeah, well, karma's a bitch." Morrison studied him. "You've changed, Vitale. Word on the street is you've gone soft. Some people think you're vulnerable. Let them think that. I'm not interested in proving otherwise anymore. Just be careful. There are always people looking to take down someone who used to be on top." Morrison handed him a folder. "Speaking of which, Dominic Castellano is trying to make a deal. He's offering information on other crime families in exchange for a reduced sentence." Marcus opened the folder, scanning the documents. Dominic was desperate, willing to betray anyone to save himself. It was pathetic and predictable. "He's got nothing on me. I made sure of that." "I know, but he's going to try. He blames you for his arrest, for his uncle's death in custody. He wants revenge. Then he'll have to get in line." Marcus closed the folder. "Thanks for the warning, Detective. I'll be ready." But as he drove back to his office, Marcus realized he wasn't afraid. Dominic could try to hurt him, could spend his prison sentence plotting revenge. It didn't matter. Marcus had built something that couldn't be destroyed by one man's hatred. A community center that fed and housed people, legitimate businesses that employed hundreds, a foundation that funded scholarships and job training. He'd built a legacy that would outlast any vendetta. Sarah was waiting in his office when he arrived, her laptop open, working on expansion plans for the center. "Morrison warned me about Dominic," Marcus said, pouring himself a drink. "He's trying to make a deal, probably going to come after me however he can. Are you worried?" "No. He can't hurt what we've built. Not anymore." Marcus sat down across from her. "I've been thinking about something. The center on West Madison. It's just the beginning. We could do more. Open centers in other neighborhoods. Expand the programs. Really make a difference across the city." Sarah's face lit up. "You're serious?" "Completely. We have the resources, the infrastructure, the people, and we have you. Someone who understands what people need because you've lived it." He leaned forward. "I want you to run it. All of it. The Vitale Foundation. Full authority to expand, to hire, to build whatever you think will help." "Marcus, you saved my life twice, Sarah. You made me want to be better. Let me give you the resources to save other people's lives too." For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. Then she stood, moved around the desk, and hugged him. A brief, fierce embrace that said more than words could. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't let you down. I know you won't." Over the following months, the Vitale Foundation grew into something neither of them had imagined. Centers opened in 6 neighborhoods. Job training programs placed hundreds of people in legitimate employment. The medical clinics provided free health care to thousands. And slowly, Marcus Vitale's name began to mean something different in Chicago. Not fear, but hope. Vincent remained skeptical, warning Marcus that he was making himself vulnerable, that enemies would see his transformation as weakness. But Marcus had made his choice. He would rather be vulnerable and useful than powerful and destructive. 1 year after Sarah had burst into his office and screamed her warning, Marcus stood at the window of his penthouse, watching rain hammer the city. It was the same view he'd had that night, the same storm-dark sky, the same sense of standing at a crossroads, but everything else had changed. Sarah joined him at the window, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She'd moved into her own apartment months ago, had built a life independent of his protection, but she still came to the office most days, still worked beside him, still challenged him to be better. "Do you remember that night?" she asked, handing him a cup. "When I ran in here and told you not to sign. Every detail. You looked half dead and completely terrified. I thought Vincent was going to shoot you. I thought he was going to shoot me too." She smiled. "But you listened. You actually listened to a homeless girl who had no reason to be there. You gave me a reason. You showed me that someone still cared about doing the right thing, even when it cost them everything." Marcus turned to face her. You saved my life, Sarah. But more than that, you saved who I could become. We saved each other, she said quietly. I was dying on those streets, Marcus. Not just physically, but inside. I was losing hope, losing myself. You gave me purpose. You gave me a way to matter. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the rain wash the city clean. Outside, Chicago continued its endless rhythm. People working, living, struggling, surviving. And somewhere in that vast urban landscape, the centers they'd built were providing shelter, food, hope. Marcus thought about the contract he'd torn to pieces, about the trap he'd almost walked into, about the girl who'd saved him from his own ambition. He thought about the man he'd been, ruthless, powerful, feared, and the man he was becoming, smaller perhaps, but more substantial, more real. What are you thinking? Sarah asked. That I spent 20 years building an empire on fear and control. And it took one brave girl and a piece of paper to show me that none of it mattered. That the only thing that really matters is what you leave behind when you're gone. And what are you going to leave behind? Marcus smiled. Something better than I found. Something worth remembering. Sarah raised her coffee cup. To second chances, Marcus echoed. And they drank together as the rain fell and the city lived and the future, uncertain but hopeful, stretched out before them. The motif that had begun that stormy night, the rain, the sense of washing clean, of starting over, had come full circle. Marcus Vitale had been a king of the underworld, a man who controlled territory through violence and fear. Now he was something simpler and infinitely more complex, a man trying to do good in a world that had taught him only how to do harm. It wasn't redemption, not completely. The past couldn't be erased, and Marcus would carry the weight of his choices for the rest of his life. But it was transformation. It was growth. It was the recognition that power came in many forms, and the most enduring power was the kind that lifted others up rather than tearing them down. Sarah had shown him that. A girl with nothing had given him everything that mattered. And as they stood together watching the storm, Marcus knew that whatever came next, whatever threats emerged, whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. Not as boss and employee, not as protector and protected, but as partners in building something that would outlast them both. The rain continued to fall, washing away the old world and making space for the new. And in that moment, standing in his office with Sarah beside him, Marcus Vitale felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Peace. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more compelling narratives. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below telling me what resonated with you most, and let me know where in the world you're listening from. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more stories with you soon.